Hi, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this Hey Teives event. I'm here to talk about my favorite topic, books, and most specifically, my favorite type of book, which is children's books. My name is Dena Rosenfeld, and I don't know if all of you know this, but I am a preschool teacher by training. I started my literary career in the classroom. Mostly because I was very upset that while the English department of the school, the day school I was working in, had so many books to choose from, we had absolutely nothing in the Hebrew department. There were no books that qualified as literature, or very few, and certainly not for the very young children. I found that any Jewish book out there, I kind of had to edit as I went along. I had to, shorten the stories. I had to take books from the public library in order to teach Jewish topics. We were really scrambling around. There were no books. And today, thankfully, that has changed. Now there are so many beautiful Jewish books for children. And it's not just a great teaching tool, but literature is really appeals to the heart, and storytelling appeals to the heart of the child. And the Rebbe spoke about telling children stories in order to impart lessons to them and to make topics that may be big and a little daunting more relatable to children. So using stories and mashalim has always been the way we teach, but having an actual children's book to go with every lesson and to plumb the depths of the story is something that teachers have always done. And I would like to assure you that when we put the books together, I always bring an educational point of view. I try very hard to make these the books that I wish I had had when I was teaching the 3 and 4-year-olds years ago. So let's start with the very youngest children. What makes a wonderful book for very young children is a simple storyline, big, bold, bright pictures, and often a board book. And the board books teach really important concepts, stories, and when children are this age, when they're between, 12 to 24 months, when you're reading these very short stories to them, they pick up everything, they memorize everything, as you're aware, and then leaving them with only positive things to say, because they're such little mimics, is one of the goals that we have for this age group. So the purpose of a book like this, always be ready to make a new friend. That's a great Avos Yisrael, part of any Avos Yisrael lesson. So while you're teaching them a song about Avos Yisrael, and the time of year probably when you stress Avos Yisrael, like Omer time, that kind of book just adds to the curriculum and makes everything so much brighter and more interesting. At the very beginning of the school year, and this is true at school and at home, when the theme is always creation and appreciating Hashem's world. Hachai, that's my baby, Hachai Publishing, which I'm the editor there. I've always looked for books that emphasize the beauty of Hashem's world. And we have, of course, the creation book with its beautiful and interesting artwork, all made by, we try to use top artists and a great variety of looks and styles in our books, just like any trade book you would find in Barnes and Noble. We don't use the same artist for every single one of our books. So something like this, when you start the year with Bris Ha'olam, is a natural, of course. But we also have a book like this, If I Went to the Moon, talking about why the earth was specifically created as a place to do mitzvahs, and that people were specifically created to do mitzvahs as opposed to other creatures and animals. So there's a lot of chassidus in the books, and I don't know if you're familiar with every single one. You may have seen them all and followed them all, but grouping them like this is, I think, helpful for when you are planning which books to bring in to your curriculum at what time of year. And the same message. Hashem created people in order to do mitzvahs. So you see the themes running along in this way. And most teachers do a unit on parts of the body, and then it's a natural outgrowth of Hashem creating people. So we have a book on the 5 senses, which again is an exploration of the intricacies and beautiful details that Hashem put into the creation of the world and of humans and animals, and everything is included in this exploration. we think very deeply into the level of the children that we're targeting. So when we have a book that looks young, it's because it is young. So something like this, where we're exploring not just parts of the body, but also human feelings. When it looks bright and preschooly, it's because it's really geared for a very young age. And we try to keep teachers and parents in mind. And very soon, this book, My Sometimes Feelings, about how Hashem gave us the opportunity to have all different kinds of feelings, will soon have a feelings chart that will be the right size to hang up on the wall of classrooms and nurseries at home, and an exploration of children's feelings and developing emotional health. But let me just give you an example of why a topic like feelings needs to be approached from a Jewish point of view. Because, you know, if you go to the public library, of course you can find books that are about different feelings. But why is it important that all the books you offer be Jewish books? There is, besides the obvious, where the characters are dressed in a way that children find themselves in the books, you know, a boy wearing yarmulke and tzitzis, and girls being dressed sneastic. The other idea is that certain feelings, even though they exist, still need to be dealt with. And this is, again, we bring in a lot of Hasidus into the stories. The idea that anger is something you feel, but it's something that we don't just say, when you're angry, stomp your feet or throw a pillow or punch a pillow. That's not really our approach. Our approach is that anger is an emotion that we help children work it down. That it comes from the nefesh habahamis, and it's something that we have to deal with. Being angry is not where we want to stay. That's not a feeling that we want to give to vent. He holds himself back, and he sort of, you know, is dealing with his anger. And this is a very good practice for children to act out, and for when things crop up in the classroom or at home. It's nice to have a story where you can say, remember that boy, and remember how he looked, and what his little sister did to his beautiful drawing, and look what he did. And he gave her a clean sheet of paper to do her own drawing, and his anger didn't get the better of him. So these are the kinds of things we build into the books, or even a feeling of calm being associated with Shabbos and with a beautiful, warm feeling. Every page of the book, every piece of art, and every word is so carefully vetted, and we try to put as much as we can and pack it with content, with teichen, and with positive messages and mitzvos Teives. Some of our authors at Hachai are preschool teachers. So I want to give an example of a book where you wouldn't necessarily think of this topic, but every teacher starts the year with talking about Hashem creating the world and talking about people. And it's natural also that you're learning the children's names at the beginning of the year, or perhaps just a mother at home, or, you know, as a shliach, sometimes you ask people, what's your Jewish name? And this really encapsulates what we try to do with every topic, is to think about it in the broadest possible way so that we include everything we can. We want to make each book as the definitive book about Jewish names, including as many names as we can, and including as many concepts about names as we can. So what might be a fun activity is to take name tags and everybody writes a Jewish name, and also to tell children stories about who they were named for. And you'll notice that in recent years, if you follow Hachai and our offerings, we have started to be more mindful about the fact that being Jewish doesn't imply that anybody looks only one way. So inclusion, Jewish inclusion, has to do with both the way there are different minhagim in the Jewish community. So we have a boy with longer payas. We have kids who look very different, different heights, different sizes, different interests. We try to show a variety and different abilities. So a child who has gets around in a wheelchair should be something that becomes something that children are used to, that they don't hurt anybody's feelings, that they accept each person exactly the way they are. So we really are careful about including people of all different appearances and different types in our books. So this particular one about Jewish names is a very good jumping off place for talking about names, and some names are Hebrew, some names are Yiddish, the different ways in which, at different times at which girls and boys get their name. And that's something that we try to make both look very festive, because they are. We are equally thrilled with the baby boys and baby girls. We want all our books to reflect that. And the Rebbe did give many answers to David Shalom Pape when he was printing Mashiach Times about it, very specific comments about how the art should look for children, including girls, including boys, making sure that everyone's represented. Another form of Jewish inclusion would be names that are not just from one community, but from many communities. We have, in this book, we have the name Mazal, we have Golda, we have all different, representing all different kinds of kids, looking all different kinds of ways. So I hope that's appreciated in the communities you live in, the schools where you teach. And something like this could be fun too, where every child writes their name and sees how many names do you have. Some children have a lot of names. And of course, the idea that in Mitzrayim, Yidden didn't change their names. These are all very important things. And the fact that the name that we use when we daven for somebody is their Jewish name. So there's packed full. It looks like a cute little thing, but we try to pack into it all different levels of both information and appeal, so that it's something that the teacher, parent, and the child enjoy together. People often ask me why Hachai doesn't have recordings of the books. So children can take a book, go off by themselves, and listen to a recording of it. And that's pretty much why. The answer is we really want time to enjoy books to be something that's between the adult and the child, that every book is an experience, an opportunity, a jumping off place for conversation and for follow-up. And that can be done with dramatics, like acting out a story. It can be done with sequence cards, where you take a book like, is it Shabbos yet? And there are lots of different steps leading up to Shabbos, and turning that into a sequence activity is something that would be great. Here's another example of a Jewish topic and an educational topic that are a perfect fusion. A book about tzedakah. We all understand why we have to teach kids about tzedakah and encourage giving tzedakah, but this book also happens to be a book about subtraction. So the idea that we start off with 10, and on every single page we have a representation of one less on each page. And as you turn, it becomes more obvious that there are some missing. So why does a book about subtraction have to be Jewish? Because why not? Before you ever go to get a resource from a secular place or a teacher's resource center, it pays to look in the Jewish market first and see what there is, because there's so much. Obviously, the books about Jewish topics, you would a book about Kibbud Av V'Em, you would look for in a Jewish book, but it's those other topics like subtraction or a book about feelings, where you might think you could get it from somewhere else, but there's a huge, beautiful back library at Hachai just waiting for you to look at and to benefit from. There's another category of books that are, I think, that are very important for follow-up and for teaching children things that are more about how to deal in Adam L'Chaver. So this book, for example, by Sarah Blau, a local author, completely deconstructs what it means to apologize. Oops, I'm sorry was, again, very carefully thought out. A book about saying you're sorry has to include some mistakes, but we didn't want those mistakes to be something violent. We didn't want children to be hitting each other and saying they're sorry, or doing real damage. So the examples were very carefully chosen. The first one is just spilling something, a true mistake. And the idea that saying sorry has important steps. Saying sorry is first, help to fix it, and then find a way to make sure it won't happen again, which is basically the way we do tshuva. So this book lends itself to the time of year when we talk about tshuva and we talk about mistakes. And that is a huge topic for young children who are making lots of mistakes and learning from the mistakes. So we frame it in a way that each character finally internalizes this message. And I wish I had a book like this when I was in the classroom with a bunch of 3-year-olds who often had to say they're sorry. Sometimes people ask me why Hachai doesn't have a book about bullying. And one of my problems with bullying is that to make a bullying story, you really have to show a child being really unkind to another child in a way that it's a little bit of a problem. How do you depict one child being really cruel to another child? So what I have to offer in this regard is a book that has to do with differences. How do you deal with a situation where somebody's different? Do we make fun of them when they're different, or do we accept and celebrate the differences? And this story is perfect for that. Pat Roll Pull is about a little girl who doesn't know how to braid. And you'll notice that the word braid, a child may be unfamiliar with it, and that's why we made sure the artist depicted her with braids. So now the child understands exactly what a braid is and why, not everyone at 3 and 4 years old can do that when they make challah in school. So in this particular story, when she can't make a braid, her friends think it's funny, and they all end up making challah that looks like all different kinds of things. And nobody makes fun of her for not being able to braid. And they all start making, these wacky looking challahs. And as you know, when you put dough in the oven, it all comes out looking basically like challah. So no harm done. And it's not like a perfect ending that she learned how to braid and everything's okay. The idea is her friends act like friends, and that's real Ahavas Yisrael. So a fun activity to follow up would be to give the kids challah dough and make challah that's not a braid. Make something else. Make a little creature. Make a bird's nest. Make a snake. Whatever they're going to make out of their challah dough, it's all going to bake and it's all going to be challah in the end. So these are Jewish value stories, and they're really, I think, an important way, the literature, and by having another child experience this, it's a good way of bringing a point home. I mean, Labels for Labels, a book like that, where these two kids experience these different challenges and learn something about it themselves at the end. The same is true of Messes of Dresses, and talking with children, young children, about, is it possible to have too many things? Is it possible to have too much? It's an interesting conversation. And that's really the point of literature. Literature is made to help people think and analyze and use those critical thinking skills that we have in order to learn lessons. The same is true about this book. You might think, oh, another Shabbos book. But essentially, Shabbos is just a vehicle to teach the lesson about being happy wherever you are. Whatever chair you're sitting in, finding the good in it. This little girl, everybody wants to sit in her chair. Wherever she moves, somebody says, hey, I want to sit there. Look, and you can see the unhappy faces. And this happens in the car all the time. This happens in so many situations where the story, sometimes it's better than a lecture. It's a story. It's real literature. It's the kind of book a child will say, oh, read it again, following her adventure as the child who naturally has this happy nature. And she doesn't mind trading seats with anybody who's unhappy. She marches to a new seat, determined to find something good about it, and she always does. So this kind of story is very inspiring and very useful when children have to take turns, when children are asked to compromise on something. This backlist that Hachai has put together, it's like there are about 100 books that have stood the test of time, and they are very useful for teaching these kinds of lessons. At the moment, we have a brand new book that is called The Surprise in the Desk, and this is our venturing into the telling true stories. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, but it was on national news. A rabbi bought a desk from this woman, and when he took it apart to try to move it into his office, he found a bag stuck at the back, and he opened up the bag, and to his surprise, he found a huge amount of money, $98,000, and it made a very big Kiddush Hashem when he returned the money. And we were in contact with the family. The author was in touch with the family for telling them that the book is going to be produced and getting, the ages of the children just right, because telling true stories is a very valuable way of teaching lessons. And the woman he returned the money to, was not a Jewish woman. So Hachai has a Hashavas Aveda book, but this is not it. This is more a book about being Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, and what a beautiful impression it makes when people are honest and do the right thing. So again, wonderful lessons. Follow-up can be a classroom activity of doing various things in the class that make, or thinking of examples of ways of making people proud, acting out the story, hiding something and then finding it and then returning it, and all those kinds of little plays and little activities will underscore the message. So I could talk about books all night, but I don't want to ignore, I went all the way from board books to picture books, and I don't want to ignore the older reader. When a child has mastered basic reading skills, Hachai has offerings that are, again, very carefully thought out to tell Jewish stories from history, because there's no better way to really encourage children to feel what Mesiras Nefesh is, when making life choices as historical fiction. So of course these stories are fiction, but they're set in historical time periods that provide a beautiful backdrop. This is set in the days of Melech Chizkiyahu. They're digging the water tunnel to bring water into Yerushalayim, and it's a great adventure. And they even, it was an honor to be able to work with graphic designers so that the pages look very inviting. The words are not too close together. The size of the font is nice and large. It looks very friendly for a new reader to attempt. And throughout the book, on every chapter, we have some illustrations to kind of keep a new reader turning the pages. Illustrations like this just make it more, bring the history to life and make it easier for them to appreciate. And we have some, and what's a great opportunity is, of course, we have a story set in 1492 with the Inquisition and the sad story of the Yidden having to leave Spain by force. But what we did here was not have the hero of the story is not staying in Spain and hiding and pretending to be a Christian. We took the ultimate decision, the hardest decision, the one to leave and to relocate and to leave all their wealth behind. We try to take that Torah choice in each one of the books, specifically because the other stories are told, I'd say, more often in Jewish literature. And from Jewish literature is kind of a new area. We want to represent those choices. So we have Amsterdam in 1650, we have Russia in 1853. There was all, conscripting young boys. We tried to again, we're very conscious that a young new reader is in maybe third grade, second to fourth grade. So we didn't want to make it too scary. So of course the Cossacks come and they sort of, clean out the farm, and they take the chickens, but we don't have them actually kidnapping young boys. Just that children start to get familiar with these periods in history. Here's another good example. In this book, which is Hachai's immigrant story, we have a father who comes here and does not work on Shabbos. That story is not, I don't think children in third grade can understand what extenuating circumstances are and what a Nisayan like that looks like. So Papa in this book works at home, so he doesn't have to work on Shabbos, and he does piecework at home. And of course, there's a whole adventure, but it's again, the idea of making that choice and what it meant to come to this country from, in the ride on the ship, and what it meant to reunite with family. Again, the beautiful setup, beautiful large words, large spaces, illustrations to make it easier and to capture what it must have looked like back then. So the quality and the level is perfect for a child who's just gaining their footing and starting to read. And that means we try to make the interest level high enough that a child who's learning to read when they're 9, 10, 11, will still enjoy a book like this. And of course, this is our World War II offering. This book takes place, we didn't tell a Holocaust or concentration camp story for such young children. We actually took real events from the life of Tuki Treidel and fictionalized whatever she didn't remember. So it's based on real events, and in a most reassuring way, we feature, pictures of the family that all survived, so that children can read about it, but still it's age appropriate. And I think age appropriate literature is very important. We want children to read to their level and not be scared, but be encouraged to learn what they can from books, which is so, so much. So again, thank you for having me. I would love to get feedback. We take feedback from shluchos and teachers very seriously. And we try to put into the books everything that you need to make these books part of your classroom, part of your homes, part of your shluchos, part of your Hebrew schools, and serve your needs and work, to your advantage with the children. And hopefully you enjoy reading these books yourself, so that the whole experience is a positive one and not just educational, but enjoyable. Thank you so much. You should have a wonderful Teives. And I hope you're going to come up with lots of new and innovative ways to integrate literature in the home and the classroom. Thank you.